Hey there, everybody. My name's Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hey, everybody.
And we're with the Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples of how small, emerging, and challenger consumer packaged goods, CPG brands, can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business with the consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's something that's important to you at this time. The bottom line is Tracy and I have been doing this for a long time. We've made a lot of mistakes. We've also done a couple of good things. And if we can help smooth out your journey on the road to retail, we'd love to help. Tracy?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So like Bruce said, we've been doing this a long time, 30 plus years to be exact. And what Bruce mentioned was that our experiences in commercial operations. And what we mean by that is sales, marketing, divestitures, trade marketing, managing distributors, managing brokers. We've pretty much done it all throughout our careers. And again, our goal here for our Road to Retail podcast is to help small emerging challenger brands maybe avoid some of the mistakes and also enjoy some of the successes that Bruce and I have throughout our careers. Also on our podcast episodes, we invite friends, colleagues, and brand founders to share with our audience their experiences and mistakes and accomplishments to share with our audience. So Bruce, tell us today who our distinguished guest is.
Excellent. So today we have the privilege of having Doug Hall on the show. Doug kind of fits all the examples Tracy just gave. He's been a founder of businesses. He's founded the Eureka Ranch, I would argue, and I'm a bit biased here. Doug and I have worked on some projects together over the years. The finest new product development operation in the country. He also is the co-founder of Brew Distillery, which is a custom whiskey bourbon operation, which we'll talk about today. But Doug also has done a lot of other things. So rather than do the injustice of me babbling on about it, Doug, why don't you give a little more background on what you've been doing for the past 40 years of your life and what you're doing now. And thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Oh, Tracy, Bruce, thank you for having me. It's always good to try to help folks on this journey. When I started doing this stuff 50 years ago, there was a lot of people that helped me. And sometimes I was too stubborn to listen. But eventually I listened enough that I got smarter. And so now it's the job to share it. So I've been doing this a long time, 10 years at the Procter & Gamble company. And then I created this thing called Eureka Ranch, where we help companies around the world, mostly large companies. That's where we made our fame and fortune, I guess you'd say. But a number of years ago, I created a program to try to bring some of that to small and mid-sized businesses. So we've got programs on that and books that we try to do to help folks out. And then I, as an inventor, helping people with growing their business, you get to work on, and when you own the company, you work on things you like. And I happen to like whiskey. So worked with the big companies, Diageo, Edrington, Macallan for many, many years. And while working with Macallan, I learned something. I said, how important is that sherry oak casks you use? Do they matter? And we're sitting at lunch in Scotland, in Perth, Scotland, and one fellow yelled 70%, another one said 80%. The other one said, nothing else matters. And I put that in the back of my head, and I said, well, that's pretty cool. So in other words, it's not the stills, it's the wood. And that permutated for a while in my head. And then I started running experiments. And then I found Joe Gergash, who became my co-founder. And I said, hey, you want to take 3 months and screw with this and see what we can come up with? And so we started working on a way to make luxury, and I mean luxury whiskeys, in a fraction of the time and cost, but really focused on really high quality stuff by using something we call woodcraft finishing. After 18 months, we entered the North American Bourbon Championship. And we took 2 of 8 double gold medals. And we didn't even drive down to it. It was in New Orleans because I said, nobody's going to win when you're only 18 months old. And it was at that point that I said, hey, let's start a company. And thus was born Brain Brew. And we'll talk about it, franchises. We've got a product called Noble Oak, which is national across the country, fastest growing ultra premium brand in the country, shipping over 100,000 cases now. And I'm not sure how it happened, but now I make whiskey. A lot of very, very, very good bourbon, primarily bourbon. I do some rye and some single malt, but primarily bourbon.
Well, I can tell you, Doug, over the years, you've always mentioned the importance of sampling. So when I saw Noble Oak at Meyer, not because I enjoy good whiskey, I just thought we needed a sampling program at my house. And so we ran an extensive Noble Oak sampling program at my house all summer, and it was wonderful. So let's dive in a little bit on some of the key words that you've already said. So, having competed with P&G for many years and had the luxury of having some former managers from Procter, talk about a little bit of that early Procter learning around, quality and proving stuff that kind of, I don't know if it set you on your journey, but I'm sure that gave you a couple of really good, Northern stars that were like, you know what, that's important.
Well, and Bruce, it's interesting because it's not what oftentimes people think when they think of Procter & Gamble. I mean, when I came out of college, I was a chemical engineer. I had worked in a Mahoopany plant one summer, and I heard about this thing called brand management, the marketing department. I said, well, that sounds really cool. That sounds like more fun. And so I go to Procter & Gamble thinking, because they were the biggest, I don't know where they are now, but they were the biggest advertiser on the planet. They bought more advertising than anybody else. And they were known for their marketing excellence. And so I go into the brand management department thinking I'm going to a company that is just going to be the marketing wizard. And they are very good at marketing. No doubt about it. Many of the things that we take for granted today were created by them, many of the research tools and systems and methods. But what I learned when I got there was that was not the key to Procter & Gamble's success. Procter & Gamble's success is very simple. Build a better product and then tell the world about it. That's it. Build a better product, then tell the world about it. Now, this is contrary to, in particular, I can tell you here, with many of the clients we work with, they've got the reverse. Come up with a marketing gimmick and then sell the same old stuff. And basically the idea is, I call it mindless marketing. The idea is I'm going to trick you into buying it, and you'll be okay with it. Well, the problem is, when you look at how sales happen, awareness, consumer learns that you exist, trial, they buy one and try it, and then repeat purchase, and then additional repeats. Well, guess where all the profit is? Well, it's not on the awareness and it's not on the trial, because oftentimes you have to do the specials to get them to try it. It's all in the repeat. And you know what drives repeat? A better effing product. That's simple. There it is. Our goal with Brain Brew in our testing, listen very close, because this is my standard. There's different price tiers of whiskey. There's actually 5. They call it premium, super premium, standard, ultra premium, luxury. There's 5 different price tiers. And our goal is to win 60-40 in a blind taste test, our product against a product costing twice as much. Mm-hmm. Pretty simple. Because you know what happens when you beat a product that costs twice as much? A whole chain reaction of positives happen. Word of mouth happens. Bloggers talk about it because they found something that is an incredible value. That's how they think of it. You end up with a thing where word of mouth gets people to buy it. And the net result is, instead of having to have a truckload of money, you don't have to invest as much to get people into it, because they get it and then they repeat and they buy and they buy and they buy.
Interesting.
And so the Procter & Gamble story is simple. Build a better product and then use your marketing to tell the world about it.
So Tracy, why don't we dig in on differentiation a little bit there? Because we're going to get to research methods in
Yeah,
some of Doug's
absolutely.
ideas that won't sink the Bismarck cost-wise, because everything doesn't have to be expensive to learn.
Yeah. Just great advice so far, Doug. It's really simple, and I love that, and I think our audience loves to hear that, because I think we make it harder than it actually is, and I know brand founders do that. They make it way harder and more complicated than it really needs to be. So tell us a little bit about the importance of differentiation, and more importantly, like what makes a product different. I think there's some levels that you would like to talk about.
Yeah. So there's two parts to it. It has to be. It can't just be weird. Okay, you can be different and weird. You know, put pink flamingos on every bottle. That's just weird. Okay, unless it's a Jimmy Buffett thing or something. You know, it's just plain weird. What you have to have is you have to be meaningfully unique.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be giving the customer something that matters to them, that's noticeable, that's real. You know, a way to think about it is they need to be able to articulate this as much as you, because if they're going to use word of mouth to get somebody else to do it, they're going to have to be say, that thing is the most amazing thing. It has got massive complexity, but it's really smooth. Because sometimes you get, like in a whiskey, you'll get massive complexity and impact from a barrel proof, blow your brains out, but it also just blows your throat out. And so to get complexity with a clean, smooth finish on it, that's pretty cool. You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so you've got to have the ability to have a difference that's a difference that matters. And that's where, you know, you have to go outside yourself, because it's not a difference that matters to you unless you're going to buy a lot. But I'm assuming you're not going to buy a lot of your own product. So it's about the people that are going to buy it. Do they perceive it after they've tasted it, after they've tried it, after they've demoed it, whatever it is? Do they say, yeah, that's different? And so, you know, we're looking for how appealing it is and how uniqueness is together. And what happens is, I'm going to just show it to you. It's a cone-shaped distribution such that the more new and different you get, the more likely it is to be wicked good, which is what we want, this meaningful unique, or wicked bad, it's just plain stupid. And so we're pushing for something that is different good instead of different bad, but that is perceptible, noticeable, and matters to a customer. When you have that, you win. That's it. You get that one thing right, and you will win. It may take time, but you will win.
Yeah. And one more question on that. So how important is price when bringing a new product into the market?
It's important to not create. Okay, let me break this into two parts. Sometimes you want to sell, if you've got a lower cost, an actual lower cost of production, then you can make money on a lower price. If you don't have a production process that's 20, 30, 40% cheaper, then that's suicide selling at a lower price.
Yep.
Okay. So let's set aside that example, because that's a real thing. And if you can figure out a way to drive the cost down. In my case, I've driven the cost down, but I'm still selling it for high. And you know what that means?
More profit.
Yes. That's the win-win. And you can do that.
Yeah.
Our fallback on this whole thing has always been, well, if it doesn't work selling it at the high end, if we can't compete at the high end, we can always sell it cheap. And Joe and I never wanted to go there, because why? And so price matters. Though in my case, I have to set the price relative to my benchmarks that are in the marketplace. So while maybe, everybody will say there's nothing like us, there is an alternative that people buy in that moment, occasion, where they're going to use your product. There is an alternative, the next best alternative. Sometimes it's close, sometimes further away. And in their head, when they're sitting there in the store and they're looking at it, they're looking at this and looking at the price compared to what they normally get. And you can be up a little bit. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you can't be crazy if you're
Right.
a little guy. Now, if you're a big company, you've got such bombardment marketing that you can get away with more because you can communicate your message better. But
Right.
if you're a smaller company, I got to be able to exist pretty simply. And so I don't want to disrupt it too much.
Right.
So
Bruce?
Doug, I want to follow up there real fast. So all the people that have walked through the doors of the Eureka Ranch, I would imagine many of them say something like this, because I hear it a lot. Well, what we want to do is occupy the premium space in the market. And then you look at their product and there's really nothing that unique about it. There's not a taste or a performance or a delivery system difference. How do you counsel people in the darkest part of their home when they're listening to Pink Floyd music to do some introspection and say, is that really what you want to do? And if so, what makes you think this can win?
Yeah, Bruce, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's delusional, obviously. It doesn't take rocket science to figure that out. But sadly, I can tell you, especially over the last 30 years, there is less talk about reasonableness. And this is something that got declared by somebody above them. Somebody put together a strategic document and said, that's how we're going to win. And then they passed it down to the team to figure it out. And even though they haven't given them the resources, they haven't given them the assets to do the product development, they haven't done the things they need to do to upgrade the product, because you can make the product better and do that. That's all a doable thing. But if you're going to do that, then you got to change the product, because the same old stuff is the same old stuff, and consumers are not stupid.
No.
Now, if your brand, you could make that work, Bruce. We're going to offer the premium position among a targeted segment. So we're going to target our segment, use all the new tools, and we're going to only target stupid people. And if you targeted stupid people, you could get away with selling a premium product that is the same old stuff as everybody else. Other than that, it's crazy. The only way I found to deal with it is to confront reality with research and show them that people aren't buying it.
So that kind of leads into the next thing I'd like to dig in on. Perfect segue. So with a new product, once an entrepreneur or a company thinks that they've crossed at least some of the bridges and they want to go forward, you know, you've already discussed the importance of trial, awareness, trial, repeat, the money's in repeat. What sort of, testing or validation should a company look for internally first before they start really cracking out the checkbook?
Okay, so I'm not interested in checking it and validating it before the checkbook. If that's the case, it's too late.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in our world, rapid testing, we call it, which is something the Eureka Ranch teaches, and they've got tools that cut the cost by 90% for doing rapid testing, where we can test for meaningful uniqueness, purchase intent, new and different, weighting it, and there's a whole bunch of technical stuff that we do. We have tools that allow us to do it for a fraction of the cost. And so when we were building Brain Brew, the reason I felt good about the products we entered into the competition in New Orleans is we had already run probably 100 paired comparison tests. Now, a challenge in the whiskey industry is built, I'm stereotyping, but it's not far, a bunch of old men sitting in a room with paneling, drinking their snifters of whiskey and saying, ooh, very good, I need a little bit more leather in that, pompous BS. I mean, that's what this industry is full of, lots of big egos. I said, screw that. I got taste, Joe's got taste, but that doesn't matter. Let's figure out what the people do. I mean, we talk about getting back to our roots, of the people, by the people. And so we have run more paired comparison tests, more concept tests, more packaging tests than anybody else on earth. And I know, because I've run them for Diageo, I've run them for Edrington, I've run them for Hublin when they were in the spirits business. And I know what kind of data they've got. And we use that data as a development tool. So when we're doing a sprint to develop a new product, we will come up with 3 different versions of it. We'll put it in paired comparison. In our case, if it's a product test, we will take it, because we're a distillery, we have the rights to do this, in bars, and we will have people test, one of these against Blanton's or against Buffalo Trace, or, whatever price tier we're competing against. And,
Right.
and they'll get product P and product Q randomly assigned. They taste the 2, and we say, which one are you more likely to buy? Which one do you like better? Which one's more new and different? Which one tastes like it has more smoothness? And we have a whole series of traits. It's called sensation transfer. Different things that are characteristics of the product. So we'll be looking for smoothness, richness, tastes like it's aged longer, tastes like it's more expensive. There's a whole series of these questions that we will ask. Then what we do is we take the data and we take the purchase intent, multiply times 60%, the new and different times 40%, and we add them together. Because I've written a couple academic journal articles that say that's most predictive of success in the marketplace: trial, distribution, awareness, repeat, etc. And then I take those as my dependent. I'm going way down into this. I hope
That's fine. This is good.
No, really good.
I had the purchase and the meaningful uniqueness. That's my dependent variable. That's the thing I'm trying to drive. Now, then I look at and I run a correlation matrix against flavor, richness, smoothness, tastes like something more expensive, tastes like it's aged longer. And I want to look at which things are correlating and driving my meaningful uniqueness. So even when our products are what we call spitters, so there's a volleyball place that's outdoors, and when we have a product that we think is probably a spitter, as in when you put it in your mouth, you have to spit it back out again because it's that bad. You still, what I do with the team is I say, we ship 3 products. We ship. They say they're crap. I said, of course they're crap, but they're not going to get any better with you fiddling with yourselves. So let's go test it and find out what's the biggest crap in it. And we go find the thing that we're killing on, that we're getting killed on, even with a spitter. We go back, we've got a smoked whiskey, started out horrific, has gone on to become epic. Well, we did the RB smoked bourbon. It's game breaking, the smoke. But it took many tests, many people spitting it out until we got it to something that was world class. And we would use those data. We look at the data the next morning, build 3 more products, test them that night. Next morning, do it again. Takes us usually a couple of weeks, and we can make something miraculous.
That's awesome. Tracy, you want to keep pursuing research a little bit of what these small challenger brands should consider doing?
So tell us a little bit about like some of the best techniques and methods of consumer testing. A lot of our small emerging brand audience today is probably listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. And they don't probably have a lot of money, so they don't want to invest a lot because they want to invest in product development. They want to invest in sales. And maybe they think in their minds that testing and consumer testing is not a great investment or great ROI. Talk a little bit about that, Doug, from your experience.
So let's look at what when you have test data from your customer, that has a lot of credibility with investors, with distributors, with retailers, the others. Okay,
absolutely.
I mean, that works, obviously. If you don't have that, then you're going on your judgment. And I made the proverbial experience. When I was at Procter & Gamble, I started inventing games and toys. They weren't in the games and toy business, and I made a bunch of money selling licenses to Milton Bradley and others for games and toys. And I remember my first game I built. And now you guys are going to laugh at me because I did exactly what everybody does. I had it at Christmas. My mom played it, and she loved it.
Yeah.
She loved it. She thought it was wonderful. So then in January, I had a friend. We had a business trip out to California, and I had a friend out there in San Francisco. And she pulled together a bunch of friends for a party, and I bought some pizzas for her to that. And I said, a friend of mine, fibbed, had this game and they wanted to see what it was like. And I just set the box down, the prototype. They read the instructions and played it. Well, first off, they tried to play it. They had a few problems because the instructions were terrible. And they hated the game. It was like, fortunately, I was not in the bourbon business. If I was, I would have been very drunk at the end of that night because I would have been going through it. It was horrific. And at that moment, I vowed to never trust myself, my family, or friends ever again on anything that I'm going to put my money in.
Yeah.
It's just too much of a gamble.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Well, Doug, I like one of the
we
things
do
you always
independent testing, and Noble Oak has become what it is because it's got probably more quantitative testing than anything. Our Dexter's one of the 12 top bourbons in America. Again, I'm an idiot. I'm not that smart. But I know that when you run a test and you screw up and you learn from it and you do it again and you do it again, and those cycles of learning, it absolutely works. I can guarantee, and I'm a statistician, so I don't guarantee much, but if you do those cycles of learning, or it's called the Deming cycle, plan, do, study, act, if you do that, you will win. Might take you some time, but you will win. And if you don't do that, you're just gambling.
Well, I remember on several projects, a guy who looked a lot like you in that building behind you told me, Bruce, in God we trust, all others bring data. And
Right.
it's still true. People believe numbers. Tracy,
Yeah,
did
Bruce,
you have any?
This is really the most boring podcast you could ever do. What matters? Product. What do you need to do? Have your customers measure it and tell you what they think of it. And use that to guide your development so that by the time you get to investing the money, you've built your company. Because see, here's the difference, Bruce. I'm just going back to where you were before.
Yep.
If you do all this work and you're ready to go and you get a bad result, you know what you do? You tweak the data, you look at it sideways, or you ignore the data and you go ahead anyways. If instead you've run plan, do, study, act, and you've tested and tested and tested, and you've run 30, 40, 50, 100 paired comparison tests, your confidence is bulletproof at that point. Because you know you got it. You know you got something amazing.
So what you're saying is don't trust your mom or your family or the fact that you sold it at a farmer's market on Saturday and it sold out in an hour. We hear that all the time, Bruce and I do, from small emerging brands. My family loves it. My friends think it's a great idea, but they've done no testing, no data, nothing like that.
You need independent blind testing, and ideally against a reference standard if you can find it. Sometimes you can't, but ideally against a reference standard. And I've done this with fish, where we had a thing in the back and we were cooking our fish and the competitors' fish. We've done it with all manner of things over time, but ideally against a reference standard, because that gives you a sense as to where you are. Where you stack up.
You got that frame of reference. So let's go to the next layer here, Doug. So now you've done the testing. You have some confidence that within a frame of reference that you really are onto something here, and you're going to the next step. Talk to us a little bit about the communication and clarity necessary to actually speak to consumers in such a way that's not so high that, you have to be Elon Musk to understand, but not so basic that no one thinks it's different.
I said P&G was about build a better product and then tell the world about it. The fuller statement would be tell the world about your meaningful uniqueness.
Right.
Okay. And so you need to do that. Confusion is not a strategy for success.
No.
I've written it in one of my books. I told about a fellow named Stefan, a chef. He had a restaurant in Summerside, Prince Edward Island. The sign out front said, "Seasons in time, Epicurean food and wine." I said, "Stefan, business wasn't good." I said, "Stefan, what the hell is Epicurean food and wine? Is it a food store, a wine store, a restaurant? What is it?" He said, I said, "What were you thinking?" He said, "I thought it was cute." I said, I said, you got tourists coming by. They don't know anything. So this is genius, by the way, Bruce. So just so that you're aware, you're about to hear marketing genius. I changed it from Seasons in Time, Epicurean Food and Wine, Seasons in Time, Restaurant. Okay, did you catch that? Did you
Yes.
catch
Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to forget it. Now we added to the bottom of it casual, elegant island dining, setting the essence of what it is. But you gotta first, jacks are better to open. They gotta know what you got. And so you've got to be overt, you got to be direct, and whenever possible, you increase your odds of success of still being in business after 5 years when you quantify the benefit. When you quantify the benefit. In fact, I should say one thing first before we go further. Bruce, I just was at a conference and we have data that says 29% of major packaged goods, new products, are still on the market after 5 years. That's research I did in the 90s. We just saw Nielsen data over the last 10 years. So all of the improvements and all of our methods and all the rest of that stuff, 10, 15 years later, you know what the average for a brand still in business after 5 years, new product? 29%.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say 29%.
Absolutely.
29%.
Hasn't changed. We're no smarter. We've gotten no smarter. All the work that I do at the ranch that you do, we're not getting anywhere. They're not hearing us. Now, with the whiskey, you say, well, how do you quantify it with whiskey? How do you quantify its taste? Well, as it turns out, we happen to be in an industry. Normally, you can say preferred 2-to-1, preferred 60-40. You can say that stuff. In the booze industry, there is a code of conduct that was created by the giants to never make comparative claims ever. And if you want to stay in the industry, you have to play by that game. I mean, there is a TTB law. I got dinged on my packages making a comparative, and the government made me take it off the thing. There's also a trade association, the big one, which everybody has to be basically part of. And that's the rules of conduct. You can't do it. So I can't say that I'm 2-to-1 preferred against Blanton's or whatever it is that I'm going against. I can't say it. Not allowed. So instead, what I've used is, in the place of that, we have competitions. And Paul Paco Ultimate Spirits is considered the king of the king, where they test it 3 times with different people. And it's the most robust versus a bunch of bartenders get together and do a drink fest all day and just pick some. This is really well done. And our Dexter got named 95 points, highest recommendation, one of the 12 best bourbons in the world. And so that goes on a hang tag. And we will not sell a bottle at retail without a hang tag on it. Won't do it. That makes a numeric claim. 95 points, 94 points, 12th best, 4th best wheat whiskey in the world, whatever it might be. Because that is my key to getting that message out on a crowded shelf, that we've got an advantage against them. And I learned that because I was talking to some people at Tito's, and I said, Tito's vodka, which went nowhere, and then suddenly took off. And I said, what was the key? They said, we got a unanimous choice double gold at the San Francisco competition, and we put it on the hang tags. That's it. That's what worked.
Wow.
And you'll never see a bottle of Tito's without a hang tag, and it's a god-awful gaudy one, too. It doesn't even match the colors of the bottle. It's red, white, and blue on an orange and gold. I mean, it's crazy. But they will not sell one without it.
Well, so what's interesting is right there, you hit on a great marketing tactic or strategy, but the financial guys would be like, why are we spending the money to put a hang tag on the bottle? That's another 2.3 cents per unit. And the reason is that's the magic that pushes it and gets it going.
Right.
Yeah, because instead of having to give, a 10% allowance, I put it on that and it sells.
So Tracy, do you have anything else there? Otherwise, I want to take Doug down the path of, pardon?
I'm good.
Okay. So Doug, let's talk a tiny bit here as we head toward the finish line about people that might be trapped in somewhat bigger organizations, or as you see now, these deals where big companies sell off a brand that's been dormant for 10 years. How do they get that going? Or if you inherit a brand within a big company, how do you fight the machine that wants you to bend and just keep everything vanilla?
Well, I mean, there's two paths. There's the top down and the bottom up. And so I'm going to assume from your question, we don't have the top down. We don't have leadership engaged in understanding the fundamentals we've talked about. They think a miracle can be done. And so the only choice we have is the bottom up. So what you have to do, and we do a lot of this at the ranch these days, because there's a lot of that going on. Financial people are now running companies. They don't have any understanding of marketing, business, and what it has to do. And they run on spreadsheets, and that is what it is. I can't, that's not my problem. That's life. And so what we're finding is we have teams that come and they go to one of our trainings, or we do a Eureka inventing session with them. And we get them to sell into the management to run an experiment. And it's very hard to say no to an experiment passionately asked for.
Right.
And so you look at the math and you say, we are where we are. If we're going to disrupt this, we're going to have to do something more different. So what we'd like to do is, and I usually use the biblical, 40 days and 40 nights, or sometimes we'll do the 100-day thing if it's going to take a little bit more. We say, we will create, prototype, and sell, and see what we can do if we can beat ourselves 2-1. Beat ourselves 2-1.
Wow.
Now that's a pretty outrageous statement.
Yes.
And at this point, you're held back because of fear and ignorance. Now you have greed.
There's always
so
greed.
it's a contained, and the reason I've got the time on it, it's 100 days, fixed budget, because the greatest fear of management is, I'm going to have this endless sinkhole I keep throwing money in and I can never get you to stop.
Right.
And so it's a very set time. And sometimes it's 40 days, sometimes it's 100 days, depends on what it is. And there are all kinds of methods for fail fast, fail cheap, building prototypes, selling products. There are routes to market, there are ways to do it. Sometimes when it's a really big company because they're scared to death of bad publicity, our Brain Brew, we have Brain Brew Ventures 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. It's our series of companies where we call it Brain Brew because the idea is we work smarter than anybody else. And I've done them for Procter & Gamble. I've done them for Frito-Lay. I've done them for Ralston Purina. Where we basically put out a new product. So they've got their brand with all of the blah, blah, blah. We create a new product without their brand name on it and make it real, put it on a shelf, sell it very fast, very cheap, and then run tests of it, both blind and identified. And our goal is to beat them 2-1. And then you put their brand name on this new thing, because I don't want to be milking their brand equity. I want to add to their brand equity. The worst thing you can do is take a brand, put a Me Too product on it, and you've now taken this golden brand and made it worth less. Because it used to be worth great products, now it's worth mediocre products. And so that's why I do it the other way. And you can oftentimes get a test. You can oftentimes get a test. You can get a budget because they've got money. Money isn't ever the issue. It's focus and trying to get it and to get something amazing to happen. And that usually will work. That usually will work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard an interesting comment around investing in new ideas or expanding. And the comment was this: there's almost never a shortage of cash. There's a shortage of confidence. And I thought, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
That's good insight.
Well,
Tracy, anything else to add here before we head toward the big finish with Doug? Or Doug, if you have anything else you'd like to tell our small emerging brand people about keeping the faith? And
yeah, there is another thing that I'm spending a lot of because I think about this a lot. Obviously, this is the world I live in. And there is something that we're working on now that I'm using, and I learned it from the whiskey experience because we were able to get investors in 48 hours on the first round, 24 hours on the second round. We've got success in a half dozen years. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. And in a staid, controlled by giants industry. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
With more regulations than anybody needs. 50 states have different rules, plus the federal government. I got 51 sets of rules I got to deal with. Okay. But one of the keys to my success was early on when you're looking at it. You know, you're sitting there and you got your idea. Maybe you have your product, maybe you don't. But you've got a sense of what it's going to take to do this. What you're going to sell it for. What's it going to cost to develop it? But these numbers are all soft, really soft. You know, is the bottle going to cost me $1 or $2? Is it going to be this or this? And I've got, I mean, really wide things. And so I've moved to doing a lot, and we call it Truth Teller AI. The ranch team following along has built this tool where we can enter in the uncertainty on all of those numbers. The uncertainty on what the product's going to cost, the uncertainty on the marketing costs, the uncertainty on the distribution we're going to get, the uncertainty all the way through the line. And we can put the uncertainty on it. And then we use AI to help populate the numbers because we've got so much back data. We can take your numbers and make them better. I mean, you provide the seed and then we help you make it better. And then we introduce your product in the market 10,000 times.
Wow.
10,000 times. By doing what's called a Monte Carlo simulation, where we roll the dice. We basically put a probability curve in for every one of the inputs of sales, every one of the inputs on cost. So to be able to get your profitability that you're going to get, or return on capital, or whatever you want to calculate. And that model, sometimes you do the model and you, as we say, I'm from Maine originally, we say you can't get there from here. There is no way this math works. It doesn't work at all. It's no good. Usually it's kind of okay, but the variance is so big. And then what I do is I use my team and I say, okay, that's the variance. Now let's figure out how we can reduce the variance and run tests on every one of those elements. So let me give you a very specific example. I want to take my Dexter brand and I want to take it to bars and restaurants. Well, when you do the math on bars and restaurants and what kind of promotional money you need to get onto the bar, to get on the cocktail menu, to support the brand, and to disrupt the big guys, your head blows up. It's a ton of money.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, instead of paying them, what if I got them to pay me? And so he said, what would be so cool that the bars would pay us in order to be able to offer our Dexter? And what we came up with was a custom bourbon where you can go to the bar and you have two choices. You can use our Bourbon Wizard, answer 13 questions in an AI app. It creates a recipe to your taste buds, and you can have your custom bourbon by the glass.
That's amazing.
Or you can do a bourbon pick of 16 outstanding bourbons, and you can do a flight of those to pick one. And you can even order your own bottle. But the idea is that the bar in a 12 by 12 inch space now becomes a profit center for them more than any those bottles that would have been sitting in that space would be making them. And they'll pay me to lease the machine to have it in there. And I got a billboard on the back bar. That happened because I did the math and I realized there was no way to make that math anything I wanted to do. As one pro said, you just got to get used to the way this industry works is you lose a lot of money for 5 to 10 years and then you get an annuity. I said, I don't want to spend 5 to 10 years losing money. I'm not interested.
No.
So do the math. Do the math.
Well, that's a great example, and I've seen the photos of that machine. So good for you for figuring out a different way, which doesn't surprise me at all. Tracy, any closing question or further inquiry?
No, I'm just total in awe, and I'm going on the website as soon as we hang up here and ordering my custom bourbon. So anyway, that's awesome.
Let's roll to the, oh, hey, Doug, if people wanted to get in touch with you before Tracy goes into his big finish and puts on his top hat, how can people get in touch with you if they're so inclined?
You can get me on LinkedIn, obviously, those kind of things. But the easiest way is if you go to any of the companies, brainbrewwhiskey.com, doughall.com, eurekaranch.com, any of those elements, there's usually a thing there where you can send a note, and those just put in a note to me and it'll come right to me.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, hey, Doug, thank you so much.
Or by the way, Bruce, there's another thing you can do. Just call us. Just call the ranch. Just call them.
You guys still have old-fashioned phones? Good for
Yeah,
you.
still use them. Yeah.
All
That's
right.
awesome. I love it.
All right. Well, Tracy, let's hit the big finish here. And Doug, thanks
Yeah.
again for your time, man. This was fantastic.
It really was. It was great. So thanks so much, audience, for joining us today. Thank you, Doug, for your insight. And please continue to follow us on iTunes and Spotify, where you can hear this episode, as well as our LinkedIn page, Road to Retail. But thanks so much, Doug, again. And thank you, audience, for joining us, and look for this podcast posting soon.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.